Stormdog here with another shallow dive, this time on the game Bioshock Infinite. Just this last year, I finally played and finished Bioshock 2 along with its DLC Minerva's Den, both very fantastic experiences. It's been quite a few years since I played the first Bioshock, and have not revisited it to be honest. Enjoyed that one quite a bit as well, and so I really had high expectations going into Infinite. But I had been warned that it was a bit of a different experience, and so I knew that going in. Obviously we're leaving behind the city of Rapture, we're going to the Sky City, I believe of Columbia, and so I knew that new things were going to be a bit different. If you enjoy my shallow dives, go ahead and give a like, maybe consider subscribing. If you just absolutely hate them, go ahead and dislike it, maybe it'll validate your day. If I could first, I kind of want to go through what I see as the cons of the game. And one of the things that struck me at first was it's just not as immersive. I was used to, in the first two Bioshocks, just exploring every little environment, every little piece, finding just constant new little things, whether that be more resources, plasmids, upgrades, whatever. And I really enjoyed that, finding all these wonderful little stories, whereas you go into Infinite and it feels much more linear. Along the way they try and give you some little, shall we say, side quests, I think they call them, and it's really not much there. It requires you to do a little bit of backtracking, and that's about it. They didn't really have it called that in the first two Bioshocks. You just kind of found it. You just explored. You just found it. Whereas in this, they maybe gamified it a little bit more. Another thing I really wanted to talk about was Vigors versus Plasmids. I felt like the Plasmids were much more effective and useful. I will say, as the game went on, I found Vigors that I liked and could experiment with a little bit more, grew to understand them better, and I realized it's explained later on why at this point in the timeline we're more so working with Vigors, and so I like that they went ahead and kind of covered their bases on that. And under that preface there with Vigors versus Plasmids, it really comes down to Salts versus Eve. Eve being much more economic, much more useful. And so that was the thing about Vigors, you could very quickly burn through your stash, so most of the time I just resorted to the gunplay, and the game leans very hard into the gunplay instead of finding other ways to solve situations. I would also like to mention there was much less health, you don't really run around with the med kits, and they made up for this with a regenerating shield. And I know there are a lot of people who hate the idea of regenerating shields. I believe they have their place in FPSs. And considering what we were going for in the game, I guess to some extent it made sense. I did just miss being the brute force of my Big Daddy though. I will say I found the combat to be less tense, just because as the player, with them leaning harder into the straight up FPS, the shooting part of it, and less so the immersive part of it, you have so much more, I wouldn't say agency, you have more capability. Because honestly, your guns can get you through most any situation. You don't need to find some other way to do it. You don't need to attempt to stealth it, set up traps. You really don't even need to use your Vigors, except for maybe playing on the higher difficulties. I would say enemies in many ways don't feel as distinctive, whereas especially in the last game, Bioshock 2, they make a big point of the different kind of splices. To the point where you're even doing research on the different types just for added benefit against them, added buffs or new abilities. Whereas they don't have any of that in this game, you really just kind of have the one main unit type, and then later on they add the heart guys, whatever those are called, which are interesting to fight in their own way, especially with the Skyrail system, and I'm not sure if I felt more intimidated by them than I did Big Daddies. Definitely in the first game I was much more intimidated fighting a Big Daddy. In the second game, the big intimidating foe was the Big Sister, and I definitely felt like that. I take time to set up traps, everything else, carefully pick my environment. Whereas more so in this one, you just keep shooting at them and go recharge your shield until you're done. Now, let's go ahead and look at the positives, because I felt these cons deeply at first, but as the game went on, the positives absolutely won me over, and I feel like this is a very worthy contribution to the Bioshock franchise, although maybe not so much as an immersive sim. Definitely not as an immersive sim. The visuals and the atmosphere are just wonderful. I love the aesthetic of the Sky City, everything that's going on there, the storytelling they're doing through what you're seeing. I love that. The city in the sky. Rapture has its own kind of magic, this city underwater, where you could drown at any moment. And I didn't necessarily feel with Columbia the danger there of falling to my death or anything like that, because of the agency they give you in the movement. But I definitely did love seeing the visuals, the skylines, coming out of another area and seeing something off in the distance. Just wonderful. I really loved it there. So, not really immersive, it's definitely a more guided experience than what I found last time. Not quite linear, but definitely getting there. So, really not quite immersive. But still, a very beautiful experience that I really enjoyed. The gunplay, in the first two games, I barely use ADS aim down sights, where it is almost essential in this game. And really, you could go solely off the gunplay, like I said, at least on the lower difficulties. The gunplay is very punchy. I found these guns very, very satisfying. Your starter pistol can be upgraded to a certain point, but then I really liked using later on the carbine, the sniper rifle, the hand cannon. The hand cannon was a lot of fun, and a lot of really good guns there. Even later on, getting into some of them and figuring out how to utilize them within what situations and realizing what was better against what enemies. I do want to say with the DLC, Burial at Sea, they eventually give you the microwave gun, and I just did not find it to be useful until the second chapter of Burial at Sea, and then realized the usefulness of it in kind of stealth situations and then also against your armored enemies. So it kind of came around, but at first it's pretty useless, especially in the first chapter. The story, I cannot say enough good about the story. The story stuck with me, absolute key moments of it, and I really enjoyed how they kind of completed the circle there. That's not really a pun, no pun intended, but what they did there with that, so many memorable moments that honestly, as I go on in years, when I call back this game in my memory, I'm going to remember them. It very much so stuck with me. The music did a wonderful job of just adding to that. So many nice little moments. I think of one moment where my character found a guitar, and suddenly I realized I could play guitar, and Elizabeth is singing along to what I'm playing. It was a beautiful couple seconds of calm. So very, very wonderful. Some great moments there, and how they wrap up the story throughout the DLC. If you're gonna play Infinite, just go ahead and play Burial at Sea 1 and 2. Just go ahead and do it. It's only a couple hours added on. They mix up the gameplay. They do some really neat things. You get to go back to Rapture. I don't really think that's a spoiler, but it's wonderful seeing it through fresh eyes. Obviously, there are much more in-depth reviews out there, much more deep dives of the game out there, and some really wonderful ones. This has just been a shallow dive. I really, really enjoyed the games. I wanted to hit up some points I didn't necessarily care for, although I understood them eventually, and then some other parts that just absolutely blew my mind, and I really wanted to share that with you. I love the franchise. I'm eager to see where it's going to go with 4. Although this little part of me is worried they're just going to blow it. They're just going to destroy it. So I don't know. We'll see if they can get guys like Ken Levine and others back and kind of manage the thing. I'm not sure though. We'll see. We will see where Bioshock 4 goes, and hopefully in a couple of years we'll be talking about it. But anyway, this has been a shallow dive. Tried to keep it very shallow in the time I've had for really a game that I could have gotten in over my head with. And so this has been Stormdog. Go ahead, if you liked it, leave a like. If you hated it and you made it this far, man, you are a trooper. I appreciate your stamina. Go ahead and hit that like button. You deserve it. You deserve it.